Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Take Your Shot podcast. I am so excited for today's episode. So, today we are talking about how to work with photographers and videographers. So, working with two separate teams, and I have an amazing guest. Her name is Caroline Hinton. She and her husband work together as a husband and wife photo and video team, much like myself and Luke. And we have so much fun things we're going to dive into today. So, Caroline, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. So excited to get to share and get to talk with you.
Oh, I am so excited to dive into this. I think there's a lot of things we could talk about in terms of working with others. But first off, I would love to start by having you introduce yourself, share a bit about you and your story behind your business, and a little bit about like you and your husband.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Okay, so my name is Caroline. My husband's name is Kelwan, and we started this in 2020 is when we really started this. Of course, we started during the COVID year. What a time to start a business. But we got married in July, and basically the first, I would say, real wedding video we did was 2 weeks later. We started by doing just a friend's wedding. We asked them if we could do it because they weren't going to have a videographer. And so we basically added value where they weren't going to have one before. And we just did it for fun, tried it out. My husband got into video because he wanted to know how movies were made. So he just started messing around with video and looking up and researching camera gear and stuff like that in 2018 in the summer. And so he started playing around with making videos. And I think one of his first ones was filming people on a tennis court or something like that. And then he made a video of our missions trip. We got back and he did a video recap, and that's actually how we met, was on that missions trip. And then we got back and he started doing this video recap, and he asked me to be interviewed for it. And so it kind of continued, like, God gave us a way to hang out and stuff. And that's where video really started. He just taught me what to do and how to edit and everything. So he was kind of my teacher, and I learned quickly from him. And then I was the one with the idea to do weddings, and he actually didn't even know wedding videography existed or was a thing.
No
He had been to
way.
maybe one or two life. Yeah, he didn't know at all. He had no idea it was a thing. And so I told him, like, we got to try it. And so we did, and we loved it. And we basically kept it going because we loved it so much, in the relationship that we could build with our clients, because we just love the friendship value and the people that we get to meet. And the reason that we do it, honestly, is because we love marriage so much. We just love the marriage foundation and everything it stands for. So we love praying for our couples before their big day and for their marriage as it continues, and just getting to be a part of this really, really special day for people. It's like such an honor. So that's kind of where we're at and why we're here.
I love that. I love that. And it seems like it's just something that like brings you two together and you two are unified, and then you get to serve people in a way that is just so unique to them and like through your experience. And I think it's really cool how you guys like connected first in your relationship with video. I didn't know that. And that's kind of fun how it's like kind of full circle, and now you guys do this with other couples. Like that's so cool. I love that. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about getting started. Did you guys have any like unique challenges or things that you like really found were really hard roadblocks to overcome in your first like year or two of doing video?
I would say it's different for married couples because you have different communication that you need to have in order to do it successfully, which is both a pro and a con, because it's great because you know what each other needs. And so it's super smooth, it's super seamless. We actually work really well together as a team, and I'm super grateful for that. I don't know if every marriage this would be the right thing for people to do, to work together. And sometimes it's hard because photo or video, one person can be leading and you have to make sure you're responding and communicating respectfully to the other person. And it's a little different how you would speak to your husband or wife than you would if it's a photographer or videographer you don't know. So there's been times that I have had to like check myself and be like, did I tell him that respectfully? Like, hey, go get this shot, go do this, go do that. So I have to make sure I'm speaking to him with respect. But that's kind of the main thing. And then during just the COVID pandemic, everybody, it's like navigating, how do we work with contracts, and how do we make sure that if something gets canceled or something gets postponed, how are we working with that and treating people with respect and kindness, but still making sure that we're respecting ourselves and our family. And everything that goes along with that. It was challenging for sure.
Totally. And I feel like it comes down to like serving people well. So like serving your teammate well when you're working on a wedding, like especially if like the timeline's running behind and there's like
Yeah.
multiple locations,
Mhm.
there could be a lot of logistics. And so it's like, how do we best serve not only the couple to get the shots we need, but also like how can I be supporting my partner as they're getting the shots they need, to make sure that the video is complete or the photo album looks full. So yeah, no, I totally get that. And like communicating and serving well in like both ways, huge thing. And then also in the pandemic, I couldn't agree more. Like it's so challenging when people have to, whether it's rescheduling or postponing or even canceling a wedding or wedding coverage. How do you like protect your business and respect them in terms of like, yeah, you know, they paid for something and maybe it didn't happen. That's a whole, you know, that could be like a whole different
Yeah.
podcast
Oh
episode. But like,
yeah.
I'm definitely in the mindset of like, yeah, what is fair? Like contracts are there to protect you, and you definitely like run into that a lot of like, yeah, there's things technically I in the contract I could do this, but how can I go above and beyond and unexpectedly delight someone in different ways?
Mhm.
So it's super interesting. Like running a
Absolutely.
business, that's like a huge topic,
Oh yeah.
whole separate episode. But man,
Yes.
thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So, kind of talking about communication and working with other vendors, I would love to kind of transition to talk about the topic of this episode, which is how to best work with other vendor teams, specifically other people who are documenting the day. So, whether you are a photographer working with a videographer or a videographer working with a photographer, like how to best work with them. And so I would love to hear a little bit about your experience as a wedding videographer. Did you have any like unique challenges that came up when you were collaborating with any other wedding photographers, and not even just your own experiences, but I think even other things? Like I think we just see it happen. Like we're all in these Facebook groups. Like we see people kind of like the photographer versus the videographer,
Mhm.
and it seems like kind of a lot of butting heads. Have you run into that? And what are you seeing in the industry, I guess is my question.
Yeah. Lately I have been so sad because I've seen a lot of people, a lot of comments lately about that exact same thing. And people are saying, you know, normally I have a good experience, but I'm just so upset because this happened and they did this and they did that. And I think the main thing is just the miscommunication on the day. People don't know each other. People have different personalities and different styles, different priorities, and we just all work differently. And so the biggest thing is the communication, the beginning of the day. It makes me really sad because my heart on this situation is that I just want everybody to be in unity on this and have understanding of the other side and at least the knowledge of what the other side is trying to do or needs to do and has different needs throughout the day to make it successful. And the basis of it is that this couple paid for you both to be there and they love what each of you does. Each person is valuable and it's not about like this is about the photographer, this is about the videographer and what each needs, and it's definitely not about even portfolio building when you're there because it's like we're there for the couple. At least that's how we view it. Like we value this relationship and we just want them to have a really good experience and build a friendship with them basically. Like we wanted to feel like we're hanging out on the day. You know us, we know who you are, we know what you like, we know what your relationship is like, so we don't want this to feel forced and we don't want this to feel like a business deal or anything like that. So it's super important for that relationship on the day because the couple is going to know if you guys aren't vibing well. Like if there's an issue, if there's a problem, the couple will likely see that. If someone's annoyed or if someone is feels like they have been disrespected, then it changes how you go throughout the day. So it's just made me a little sad, but I do think with like the proper knowledge and understanding that there can be a change in this and people can just get encouragements on and just learn basically what to do, I think. And it's for us, we have the perspective of both. So I think it can be very helpful to have the perspective from both sides and maybe just provide the
Totally.
education, I think.
And I think that's been probably the biggest strength I've said to Luke and even to couples of just being a husband and wife team that offers both. You guys have a unique experience in that you guys started with video.
Yes.
We started with photo and then added video. You guys started with
Mhm.
video, then added photo.
Mhm.
So two totally different perspectives in that you kind of see the challenges when you start offering the other. So like, for example, when we started doing photography and we worked with other videographers, that perspective was so different
Mm-hmm.
after we started adding video. And I will say, as a photographer, and so I actually I actually stopped doing videography. So Luke now is the videographer. I'm the photographer. We each kind of like stay in those areas just because we find that it's really hard to be really good at both. So if I can be the best at photography and he can be the best at videography, we're getting the best results. And that's been working really well with it for us. Not to say I can't do video or he can't do photo, but we just kind of stick to our strengths. But I will say, after trying to do video, that is a whole different game. I used to always think the videographer would just be there and they'll just shoot over my shoulder. I just kind of do my thing. And, you kind of get the shots. And, I always have always asked videographers, like, okay, what else do you need? Like, that's just like a big question. Like, before you move locations, before you change things up, like, hey, what do you need? Because you want to make sure they do that. I thought that was normal. I thought that was normal until we started doing video and working with photographers where I realized that that's actually not that normal. They don't always ask you what you need. They don't always ask you, how do you feel about this? And that's been
Mm-hmm.
a really interesting thing. What has your experience been with that, though? Like, how has your mindset shifted from adding
Yeah.
on photo and doing both?
Yeah. So I taught myself photo as we were already at weddings doing video. I would kind of just watch the photographer, everything they did. I asked a lot of questions, not in an overwhelming way, but over the time of many weddings, I would ask little questions here and there, and it just kind of furthered my knowledge of how to do it. And so I love doing both. I mainly do photography when we were doing a package deal, and Kelman's the one doing all of our videography, and then we'll have some second shooters come with us. So we'll each get our second shooters depending on the wedding. But yes, starting off in video, the main thing I would say about this is videographers, when you start off that way, you learn how to do everything prompt based. You don't do any still posing because you need the movement. You need it to be organic and candid and fun and all the buzzwords these days, right? Authentic, timeless, genuine, romantic, all of those things. So that's kind of how we started. And so it was natural kind of for us to add photo in when we were already doing those things. And a lot of photographers, from my understanding, start off the other way and then with experience learn how to add that movement in. So it was interesting once we started to have that knowledge and know how and get really good at it and finding out what the couple's personalities are like, because that changes what you tell people to do completely. We found out that a lot of photographers, when we would have the couple do these prompts after they had already gone through everything they need, we were respectful and said at the end we'll just grab a few more movement shots or prompts or we'll throw in. The photographer would always come back and say, wait, do that again. I want that. That was good. Let me do that. Let me get some photos of that. So we found that what we were doing was actually very valuable to the photographer. And if that's how we had started, maybe they could have had all of that. And, it would have been maybe just a little more of a better experience for the couple to not have to redo things. So it can be very valuable, I think, from a video perspective in terms of getting couple portraits that you can start. It's valuable for both parties, and then the couple's happy because they're enjoying it. It's natural to who they are as a couple, and I think their personality can show. So that's kind of the main thing I would
I
say.
love that. What are
Yeah.
some of your, just kind of piggybacking off that? Because I think there are like a lot of those like very posed, editorial, like kind of curated photos. And I
Yeah,
think there's a place for those, but I
really.
love the movement and stuff. What are some of your favorite prompts that you feel like get that genuine, authentic, like emotion?
We love just letting them kind of be in their own space and then prompting them based off of how they're already acting. So if they're walking next to each other, okay, now hold hands, give each other a hip bump, look back at me while you do this, but then look back at each other and embrace again. And one of our favorites is I want let's say I want the groom to grab a hold of the bride's hand and then go run and frolic in the field. Once you get to the middle, give her a turn and then give her it up and then come run back to us. And then they're in their own space. We're not all up in like, put your hand here, stay there. Put your hand here, stay there.
Totally.
Yeah, less pose, but then it's like they're enjoying their wedding day, hopefully, and they
Yeah.
can
And
feel
it sounds like your approach is kind of a good balance between getting like it's kind of like almost posing, but like posing with the movement, it seems
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
But then also like letting them kind of connect in the midst of that. One of my favorite things to do after the first look is just have them go for like a quick like couple-minute walk. Like, hey, why don't you
Yeah.
guys just go walk that way, take it
Yeah.
in, and when you're ready, come back, and then we can kind of start the rest of the day. And then I'm getting some photos of them, walking off in the distance. Luke's getting some, video of that, and then they're also mic'd too. So if they have a moment and they want that included in the video, we can do that too. But it's kind of nice because they just had their first look. They can now take it in, and then when they're ready, they can just kind of come back, and it kind of sets this reset where it's not like, oh, we just had our first look. Okay, now let's, jump into photos and just that can be
Yeah.
so overwhelming. Just like
Yeah.
the power of what like 1 to 2 minutes can do for a couple and their mindset too, and their experience is so good. I loved what you were saying before about having them just like not have to repeat poses. And when I think photographers and videographers can direct with that in mind too, how can we
Mhm.
make sure that we're also optimizing this for the couple? How can photographers lead with videographers in mind? And how can videographers help
Right.
communicate some of the things that they need in terms of movement with the photographer? So
Yeah.
I think it can get overwhelming when there are multiple voices directing a couple. So
Yeah.
if the photographer, which we could talk through with this, I guess. Sometimes
Mhm.
the photographer is usually the one who will be like, okay, I'm in charge, I'm directing, and then anything you want should go through me. I don't necessarily agree with that, but there are people who have that personality. What would you say is a great way to approach someone like that? Have you run into that? Because
Yeah.
I know I have.
I guess it would just paint that it really is collaborative. It's not the photographer versus the videographer. It's both of you working together. This is for both of us. It's not like you getting what you need and then me getting what we need after. It's both of
Hmm.
us are getting it at the same time. And when the photographer runs the entire day, I think it generally is the industry standard to do that because that's just what people have their lived experience so far. That's just all they know. And that's how it is, right? It's the cultural norm in the wedding industry right now. And I would say it's not best for the couple for it to be that way. I think it would be cool if it could start to be the norm. Like, hey, okay, we're doing couple portraits. Let's let the videographer try first. Do some movement. You might hit everything the photographer needs. And then if you need you do as a photographer need your smiling at the camera ones for mom and dad, for the couple, for grandma and grandpa to hang up on their wall. We know that we'll get those. Absolutely. There's time. But yeah, I think it would reduce maybe some stress in the relationship if it was a little more collaborative instead of just like having everything go through the photographer for approval.
Yeah. And it is interesting because like I said, I know that's kind of like a theme we're seeing. And I don't even think it's most or every, but it is enough of a culture where I think it's really cool that we're talking about this because I know when I've like had those weddings where you're working with someone and you're just not aligned, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, I'm always just like, yeah, like we'll work around you. I don't want to be in your way. If we could get these things, like trying to advocate, like these are just a couple things we'd really like to see a little bit more of, including movement when doing video. Those are things that I think are good to communicate ahead of time. But I just think it's so interesting that, yeah, we aren't shooting with video in mind, or like we aren't, it isn't the industry standard to, oh, let's have the videographer lead, because I think what you're saying is it makes total sense to have, if there's going to be a lot of movement and it's going to have like a lot of genuine emotion and really showcase more of probably their personality than the classic, like, okay,
Yeah.
heads together, dip kiss, this, okay, now hand here and on the
Yeah.
florals here, like
Yeah.
you're kind of doing all these things, and they're just saying they're thinking so hard about where their hands are and if they're smiling, and it can feel so static.
Yeah.
But I think we are moving in a direction of like people just love to be able to interact with the person they love most, and to do that, and they want to forget that the cameras are there. And I think video creates a space for that, and I think photo can too. In fact, I think
Mhm.
sometimes when we shoot, it's almost like you would think there's, even if it's just photo, you would think that there's a videographer there because of just like how
Yeah.
we try to
Yeah.
navigate it. Like what you were saying, you obviously need to get the ones for ma and pa and the fridge photos of smiling at the camera, but
Really.
the fun
Yeah.
ones is like you want to have fun on their wedding day. You want them to look back and think, man, it wasn't just a photo shoot. We actually got to go and hang out. We got to go for a walk. We got to tell each other some fun jokes. We got to like
Yeah.
actually have a moment to take it all in. And
Mhm.
those moments are going to be meaningful for the couple, but they're also going to make for not only great video but also photo. And so when we shoot with that in mind of the experience, it actually is better for the couple, and it actually, in my opinion, and I'd say yours too, has a better outcome. And the
Yeah.
culture that we're seeing here, where it's kind of
Yeah.
the photographer versus videographer, I think that comes from a mindset. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, but I think it comes from a mindset of like thinking only small picture of like what do I need, and it's not
Yeah.
thinking big picture of like what's
Mhm.
best for everyone else, or it's not even coming from a mindset of how am I serving the
Yes.
people around me the best that I can. And
Mhm.
I think when you flip that around, and instead of thinking what do I need to walk away from this to get the photo album I need to have the
Mhm.
photos for Instagram or for the portfolio or whatever
Right.
it is,
Right.
and instead take a step back and think, how is the couple going to remember this day? Am I being
Complete.
a good partner to the videographer here? And
Yeah.
how am I making sure that I'm setting aside myself to serve them? And I
Yeah.
actually think you're going to have a better portfolio. You're going to actually walk away with better photos with that.
Oh,
Anyway, that was my little
completely.
soapbox. So I'd love to hear, Caroline, like what are some of your thoughts on how can people better approach the day, maybe on the front end, whether that's through communication or just advocating for what you need? How can you do that in a way that's respectful and honors the people that you're working with, but also gets what you need from the day? So, what are some piece of advice you would give to someone who might run into this if they haven't already?
So the first thing I would say is when you get there, establish a human connection first. Like find out who these people are, why they like what they do. Just get to know them as people because I think it brings a lot of value to them as a human being first and then the business second and the job at hand per se. And then you can have a good working relationship going forward and then it makes communication easier throughout the day because you know that I feel respected already because I'm not just here to complete a job. And it's developed really good friendships in the industry for us. And it feels like you're doing weddings later on, like with a group of friends, because you already know each other and you've established that you value each other and you trust each other. And it's a good working relationship. But one thing I would say is just good communication is the biggest thing throughout the day before you start your couple portraits, before you start speeches, before you start the ceremony, what are you doing? And it's really important, I think, for because the main thing I've seen is photographers having complaints about videographers getting in shots and how they handle the ceremony, mostly. And I would say that from a photographer standpoint, it is our responsibility to educate ourselves and get knowledge on what videographers do and why they need the things that they do and why they need the shots that they're getting. And videography is completely different in terms of all the gear that you need, all the time that you need, all the movement that you need. It's completely different. So if photographers just have no understanding of that, of course you're going to get frustrated because you have a different workflow. So I think it's very, very important for photographers to learn about the editing process of video in general and why you need multiple camera angles in a ceremony and where. But for video, also, I would say just during the ceremony, communicate with the photographer where you need to be, where they're going to be. I will say, shoulder to shoulder is the best option for both of you.
Yes,
It's
yes.
completely doable, and just find out what focal length they're shooting on. If it's a 35, you might need to be a little closer. Photographers, you can probably have a zoom lens, and that's okay. I do want to make sure that it's mentioned that videographers cannot edit out something. If it is the video of the first kiss, that's it. That's done. We're not going to redo it, right? We've established that. Like, please, as videographers, don't go back. Don't make your couple redo a first kiss. Don't make them redo a first look. I've heard of that. Don't make them do it. But just photographers, be aware you have infinitely more capability to Photoshop something like that out and change things in post than videographers do. So that's why it's important for both of you to have a really good shot because you're both important. But videographers has a little more challenge, I would say, in post editing for that.
100%, because
Yeah.
especially like if someone like walks through the shot or something breaks the moment of whether it's a prompt or the kiss or something, yeah, it just is awkward and then you can't use that clip. Versus photos, you can either just, I'm just not going to use that photo. I've got a great next one. But like for video, you're trying to gather as much as you can from the day to like tell the story.
Yes.
And it's so hard when like that's just not understood. And I don't
Yeah.
think, I mean, I've never really had to run into this a ton, but like, if the photographer misses a shot, they can ask the videographer for a screenshot, and there you go. You've got a photo out of the deal.
True.
I don't know if
That
you've
is
ever run
true.
into that, but like, I've heard of that
True.
happening, and it's like, wait, that makes total sense. The videographer got the whole thing uninterrupted on like one of their tripods or something. Photographer
Yeah.
asked for a screenshot. There you go. You can have a photo of it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
That
and
shouldn't be the standard, but like, that's just something to keep in mind. There are
yeah.
benefits to making sure that the shots are clean and
And
anyway.
what you said at the beginning too, just asking the questions throughout the day. This is photographer specific, but if you have a videographer working next to you, just say, "Hey, do you need anything else here before we move on? Is there anything else you want to add? Are you getting what you need?" One time, the first time I was asked that as a videographer, I was like, "Wow, this is amazing! They actually know that I'm here," and it just communicates such respect and such value and teamwork and camaraderie, I think, in that point.
So we talked through a little bit of the communication piece, which I think was super helpful. And I think transitioning to like a little bit of the logistic piece. So do you have any thoughts on timelines and shot lists or even just like when and where to be shooting the couple and thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there is a lot more for videography in terms of what you need for time, just because for photographers, just to have this knowledge, videographers need time to mic people up, and that could be the officiant, the groom, the bride, and then hooking up the output source at the ceremony and making sure you're getting that recording. And then you need to stabilize your stabilizer. You have to get that all set up too, and then you have to have multiple camera angles, so you have multiple tripods you have to set up before the ceremony. Whereas a photographer can come in and be like, all right, I've got maybe my main camera and my backup camera, I got my lenses on, let's go. So there's a lot more maybe time needed in a timeline for a videographer. Potentially, we've gotten to a point where you have your workflow, so you can kind of do things very efficiently, but photographers are the ones that are mainly creating the timelines. So if they're like, I can do a couple portraits in 15-20 minutes, not necessarily true for videographers who might be behind and still have to take the mic off and then pack up the tripod from the ceremony or wherever you're at. And typically, I think downtime during the day should be for during family photos. Videographers don't necessarily need the still shots of family smiling at the camera, so you can use that time just as a videographer. If you find yourself needing more time during the day, family photos are a great time typically to go set up for the ceremony, or if you have to throw the drone up in the air to get drone footage. But just for photographers to understand that in general, that videographers typically need just a little more time to transfer gear and all that stuff and have a little more to lug around, I would say.
Totally. And it is so hard to do that as like a solo person as a videographer. I'm really impressed when you got just one person showing up doing video on their own. I've done one video by myself and I came home and I told Luke I'm never doing that again. So props to any of you out there who do video alone. I see you. I don't envy you, but mad respect for you, especially on a tight timeline where maybe video was not accounted for in it. So we're praying for you, friend. I think that's great. I think that's really, really valuable to think through the logistics side of it. And I think for people for us, and we've both done both. I don't know about you, but I would say video is way, way more difficult than photo. I think the reason I now focus on photo is, well, obviously I love it. I actually do love it. It's my favorite part. But also video is intimidating, and I think it's really important for photographers to keep that in mind, and just knowing that like there's so much storytelling that goes in the post process, and so making sure there's time to document everything and get all that is so important. I know we touched on that, but it's just like I would love to leave our listeners with just, if you're a photographer, just like have some empathy for the videographer trying to do all this, and like try to be a good partner. And for videographers to also understand that like, the photographers feel like there's a lot of pressure on them. I'll say it. There's a lot more pressure, I'd say, on the photographer, because people do look to them to take control, whether that's something that should be the case or is the best thing. We can obviously like debate that as much as you want. Debate that in the comments. But I do feel like there's a lot of pressure on the photographer. There's a lot of visibility on the photographer, and that in and of itself can create a dynamic that they have to carry. So knowing that, and the videographer coming at it with like, how can I have a peaceful presence, and how can I be a partner and not ever demanding? I don't think either side should ever come into this being demanding or have a chip on your shoulder and say, don't get in my way. Nobody should be trying to get in anyone's way, but really coming at it in a way where you're just trying to serve the couple. And I think that's the most important aspect to like keep in mind, is like you're there to serve. And I know that's kind of how we started this episode, and I'd just love to end it with that, of just like coming into this with serving the couple, knowing that they value both. And so we should value the other as well, because they're investing in a photographer, they're investing in a videographer. I would hate to be the one to mess that up. And that's not to say don't get in their way, but like, how can I partner with them so that they're getting exactly what they need in a way
Yeah.
that advocates for mine as well? So this has
Yeah.
been a great episode. Is there anything you would like to leave our listeners with, Caroline? And also, where can people find you?
Yeah. I guess my parting words would be it is possible. And the majority of what we do and experience is really good, awesome partnerships. Like it's not the majority bad. The majority is good, but it's just because we have really good communication on the day of, and I think neither side really is, like you said, demanding, and it's possible. And I don't know, my husband and I, we just really desire this industry to be united in that, and understand just from both perspectives that it is possible, and it's just full of mutual respect and good communication. Look each other up before you get to the wedding day. Look at their style. Check them out on Instagram. Send them a DM and say, "Hey, I'm excited to work with you. Start it off well. It's possible." And we really desire to see this change. And I think the majority of it is good. So it's just weeding out those bad experiences and saying, what can we change and how can we do better? And just, yeah, increasing our knowledge of the other side so we can have that empathy that you were saying. You can find us, I guess, on Instagram and online. We have a website. Our name is Hinton Studios, just our last name, Hinton, and Studios. So all one word. That's our Instagram. It's Hinton Studios. And then our website is Hinton Studios Co. Co. And
Cool.
for hintonstudios.co. There's a dot in there. Yeah.
Love it. I love it. I love the .co. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Caroline, for being here today. We love what you and Kalaman are all about, and I think it's so fun to watch you guys grow your business. So thank you so much for coming on today. And for those of you listening, thank you for listening to this episode of the Take Your Shot podcast. We'll see you next week.